Good morning, everyone. If you would all please take a seat. It is 8:31 a.m. on this fabulous July 18th, hot day in paradise. We welcome you here. I think it's only going to get to 109 today, so we will appreciate the cool air in here this morning. We will start, as usual, with our chaplain prayer and pledges, and Chaplain Gary and Marcella Jenkins will lead us in both.
Everyone, will you bow your head with me as we pray? Dear God, we pray over our city leaders we recognize that your grace is sufficient to keep them. We ask, Father, that through your power they will be made whole, perfect in their weakness. So, Lord, let your divine wisdom rest on them, giving them, even when they are insulted, criticized, and persecuted, it is their weakness, then they are strong. I pray for the agenda that is set before them, the city council leaders today. Please give them all the wisdom that they need and what is beautiful to you, Lord. Those who have worked in and around our city. Father, also give our first responders wisdom and strength and compassion as they perform their duties, and keep them safe from all hurt, harm, and danger. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Will you repeat after me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
We have two proclamations today, and the first one will be our proclamation of July 26, 2023, as Americans with Disabilities Act Day. And I know there's many people in the audience here today to celebrate this July 26th event, so if you could please come forward. Welcome, just come on. You can come on back here, and then we'll move up front. We'll get ready to do the picture, okay? On July 26, 1990, President George H. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, to ensure the civil rights of people with disabilities. This legislation established a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. The ADA has expanded opportunities for Americans with disabilities by reducing barriers and changing perceptions, increasing full participation in community life. However, the full promise of the ADA will only be reached if public entities remain committed in their efforts to fully implement the ADA. On the 33rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we, the City of San Angelo, celebrate and recognize the progress that has been made by reaffirming the principles of equality and inclusion and recommitting our efforts to reach full ADA compliance. Now, therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, do hereby proclaim July 26, 2023 as Americans with Disabilities Act Day. Who do I hand the proclamation to? Or multiple speakers if you want. Come on.
Sure. We're very happy to receive this ADA proclamation. It means a lot to us as we are a center for independent living here in San Angelo, and we serve people with disabilities. So thank you.
Thank you for everyone for being here to support this. And even though there are a few of us up here, this is 3 different organizations that support people living with disabilities. We have Disability Connections, San Angelo Advocacy for Access, and our new nonprofit, Accessibility First, to really help families and address the needs that they have. So if you need help with anything with a disability, or you would love to advocate, then please consider joining us because we're here to support you. Yes. Yes, that's a good question. You can call any one of us. I only know my number by heart, but it is 325-710-9968, and we're on Facebook as well. We're all actually on Facebook now. And Disability Connections, you can Google them, but they have their number as well. They can share with you.
You want to give that and your email address?
Sure. Ours is 325-227-6624, and then we're at dcciltx.org, and we also are on Facebook.
Great. Let's move to the front.
Going on a cruise starting Friday, so if you get
I know there's also individuals in the audience for our National Buffalo Soldier Day weekend. Shirley, I saw you earlier. I don't know if you have others joining you. Bob, you want to come forward? Harry, you want to come down? Yeah. And who else? Carl, get up here.
Come on, Carl. Carl, get up here.
On July 28, 1866, after the end of the Civil War, Congress enacted legislation allowing African American men to serve in segregated units in the United States Army. These units consisted of former slaves and African American soldiers who fought in the Civil War. These soldiers were nicknamed, quote, Buffalo Soldiers by the Native Americans against whom they fought because of their reputation for toughness and bravery in battle and the buffalo fur coats they wore in the winter. In 1868, the first black troops reported at Fort Concho in San Angelo, Texas. The initial infantry regiments reporting were the 38th and 41st Infantries and the 9th and 10th Cavalries. The regiments worked in numerous campaigns during their time at the fort until 1885. 23 Buffalo soldiers received the Congressional Medal of Honor. Besides their impressive military contributions, the Buffalo soldiers also had a significant role in the expansion of the West by escorting settlers, cattle herds, and railroad crews, exploring and mapping vast areas and stringing hundreds of miles of telephone lines. Buffalo soldiers were some of the first park rangers in the newly created national parks and generally facilitated the civilization of the center of the nation. A joint resolution was proposed and adopted as Buffalo Soldiers' Day during the second session of the 102nd Congress of the United States of America and was held in Washington, D.C. on Friday, January the 3rd, 1992. Each year, on July 28th, this day is observed. The San Angelo chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and a core team of dedicated community and business leaders have completed the construction of a new memorial dedicated to honor these brave men. It is the only memorial in Texas with this focus. The new San Angelo NAACP Buffalo Soldier Memorial will be dedicated on July 28, 2023, and over the course of 3 days, a number of events and awards will be given out to celebrate and recognize their contributions, as well as involve young people in the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts as Buffalo Soldier Youth Ambassadors. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim July 28th through the 30th, 2023 as National Buffalo Soldier Day Weekend. Thank you very much. Your proclamation and the microphone.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I am so glad that we have this proclamation this year, and I want to allow our councilman, too, to come up here and stand with me in case any of you are taking photographs. He told me to make sure that I got this memorial opened in his lifetime, so I think we've been successful to do that. And I want to thank everyone who's standing here with me. And of course, you all know we have a lot of other members who are not able to be here this morning, but this means a great deal. San Angelo will be on the map to have the one and only Buffalo Soldier Memorial in the state of Texas, and we look forward to seeing all of you next Friday at 9 a.m. as we open our grand opening for the memorial. Thank you.
Shirley, would you like to talk through what those events are?
Sure. Thank you. Next Friday, we want everybody who has children or grandchildren or nephews and nieces and what have you to come on out at 9 o'clock. We'll have the dedication. All the activities at the memorial are free. It is at the corner of Avenue D and Oaks, directly across the street from the Fort Concho Parade Grounds. And then Friday night, we will have a dinner to honor all of those people who have worked on the project over the last year. Saturday, a repeat of the same, a lot of activities free at the memorial site. We will also have a fishing excursion on the Concho River. We will have a canoeing experience, a private swim party. We will visit the state park to see our new baby buffalo bison, and also to see our longhorns that are there. So we have a lot of fun things that are planned that are free, or $4 and $5, depending on your age. Like you have to have a fishing license. I think that's $5. And so we want the community to come out and support this historic opportunity for all of you to have a great time in the West Texas heat next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Let's come forward and have a picture.
Thank you, ma'am.
We will now move into the public comment portion of the agenda. Let me remind everybody that issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remark to less than 3 minutes. Do we have individuals in the audience this morning who would like to come forward and offer any public comment? I see none, I hear none. I count to 3 to see if somebody's late coming in. 1, 2, 3. It's closed. Done. We'll now move into the consent agenda. I will ask each council member if there's anything from the consent agenda that they would like to have pulled for further conversation. So I'll start with Larry.
No, ma'am.
Karen. No, ma'am. Lucy.
Yes, I'd like to pull item C.
Harry.
No, ma'am.
Tom.
I was thinking of pulling E, but I'll let it fly. Nothing to pull.
Don't you even think about
I'm
it.
with you. I'll let it fly.
And then Tommy.
No, ma'am.
Okay. With that, may I have a motion to approve all the consent agenda items with the exception of C?
So moved.
Moved by Tommy, seconded by Tom. Public comment concerning any of the agenda items with the exception of item C. We will take a vote. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the exception of item C, please say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. Item C is consider approving an agreement between the City of San Angelo and Peter Heidinger to instruct Aikido classes at Carl Ray Recreation Center and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Lucy?
I just wanted for the public to hear what the opportunity would be once approved.
Well, first, good morning, John Henry Perez, Assistant Recreation Manager. Basically, this is a program that's going to help, bring more public to Carl Ray Johnson also, as well as offer different programs there. So with his experience, he can teach his class, teach his program. It just helps both sides to bring people into our facility and also improve his program as well.
What age limit?
That I believe it's going to start as I think anywhere from 4 to almost adult if you wanted to go to adult programs as well.
Okay, and the price?
The price, I do not know that off the top of my head. We're still in the process of trying to get everything together first, so we can try to figure out what the price will be once we get this approved.
Can you tell us what it is?
I
For all
believe
of us who don't know what Aikido,
is a form of almost karate type of, learning that experience there by far. So I really don't know myself because I haven't learned that, but it's something that we're trying to bring also to people, the community, so they can learn as well.
have they been asking for this kind of a program?
He's came to us multiple times, but we told him we had to get it approved first. He wanted to also, he's trying to find a facility for himself to start his program up.
Lucy, further questions?
No, ma'am. I move to approve.
Did anybody else have a question or comment on it?
I was just going to say,
Tommy.
just Googling Aikido, it is a modern Japanese martial art form.
Thank you. Now we know.
Lucy going to attend, and I will second that.
Okay, thank you.
If you are,
We'll
absolutely.
do it.
We
All
have
right.
a first and a second.
So Lucy has pulled item C and has made a motion for us to consider approving item C. May I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Tom. Any public comment on item C on the consent agenda? Carl? No? Okay. With that, let's take a vote. All those in favor of approving item C, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved 7-0. We will move into our regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are exempt from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. Item A is consider approving a memorandum of understanding with the Alcohol and Drug Awareness Center for the Concho Valley and the City of San Angelo to receive funds in the amount of $188,000 for the replacement of the playgrounds at Mountain View and Bell Parks, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Carl?
Carl White, Parks and Recreation. A quick orientation of the location of these parks. Bell Park is south of the Loop, east of Bell Street, and north of Pulliam, and surely a landmark that everyone knows is the restaurant at Dunbar East. So the park is right behind that, just to the north, and the park serves this neighborhood here. Closer look, it's a moderately sized neighborhood park. It was built in the 70s. It has an old playground at this location, courts, picnic area, and a practice ball field and a walking trail. Closer look on the ground, 2 optional places for where we could put the playgrounds. It looks better on ground level, nice and green.
Yeah, it's nice and green compared to that other picture. Wasn't very appetizing,
No, it
was
wasn't.
it? No.
One location is on this end. We have freedom of area to use that space, but it doesn't have quite as much shade. We could come into this area where it has more shade, but we would have to move this live oak tree, a younger tree, and remove that. We could reuse the live oak, but we'd have to
Yeah,
remove
don't move you can't move the live oak tree. Find another strategy.
I understand. The other park, Mountain View Park, again, the loop, Sherwood Way, Arden Road. It serves this neighborhood here. There's Belvedere Cemetery. A little bit larger neighborhood park, has basically the same amenities. It does have an older restroom at this location. Look at some of the equipment. It has some of the old equipment. Again, this park was developed in the 70s. It does have a new-ish playground, but it's approaching 30 years old and needs to be replaced. A look at what new playground equipment would look like using the budget that we have. So we have a composite unit, and we have different vendors we could work with through the cooperative purchasing programs. Another example, that's an overview. Shows to be larger than the other image. And then just example toys that would go with the playground. The budget for each park is $94,000. This includes the playground equipment, the concrete for the curbing for the fall zone material, and accessible connections from the parking lot, making sure we have connection from the parking lot, accessible parking to the playground, as well as signage and associated materials. And these would be installed in-house with city staff. We have a crew that does that work.
Let me ask you a question. So it's an MOU, and describe what this MOU is, because you're showing the budget. Is that budget out of the city, your funding? And if so, then what is this MOU? So where's the funding coming from?
It's coming. I can read a statement that explains that. This is a MOU with the Alcohol and Drug Awareness Center of the Concho Valley. The Alcohol and Drug Awareness Center of the Concho Valley will pass through funds to the city of San Angelo that were received from a grant from the Texas Health and Human Services Agency. The funds have been awarded to the Alcohol and Drug Awareness Center for the Concho Valley for the specific purpose of reducing anxiety and stressors in our community caused from and continuing due to COVID-19. These funds that are funneled through the Alcohol and Drug Awareness Center of the Concho Valley should be used to implement community-wide activities and projects that reduce stress, reduce trauma, and/or promote behavioral health and wellness. Funds were made available through HR 33 COVID-19 funds. And as part of the MOU, there would be some milestones to hit. The first playground would have to be finished, fully installed, open to the public by March of 2024, and the second one in October 2024.
Does that timeline create a problem for you?
No.
Okay. What questions does council have regarding this? Karen first, and then Lucy, you'll be next.
Carl, can you share with us a little bit of background on the choice of amenities? You showed us a picture of several items, bright colors, plastics, et cetera. Is there a reason why those kinds of things are preferable to natural materials? Or even recycled materials? I know there are some new playground models that use shredded tires.
There are natural playgrounds now. Not all of them have met all the safety guidelines, and not like some of these composite units that we're working with, a little more traditional playgrounds that meet all the requirements for safety and manufacture. And
Others have to do also with wear and tear and what works in our area. From the
Longevity.
heat being one that we just mentioned. So like tires, okay, well, the black heats up, gets very hot. The colors that they select sometimes are based on what wears better for the fading caused by the heat and all those things. So we have some harsh conditions here. Sometimes you see, as far as the natural materials that we've seen in some of our original playgrounds, where you use wood instead of other things, then it deteriorates, and the maintenance is much more intense for their department. So we try to select what lasts well here.
Lucy?
My question was, Carl, in our packet, it stated that there was going to be an increase of $2,000 year to add fall zone material. Does that mean every year? Or
Yes,
is
every
this-
year.
Every year. And what exactly is fall zone material?
There's different types, but what we tend to use is the engineered wood fiber of the inside of trees, the really porous part of the trees, which is soft and cushiony. If you put it at about a foot level, it does provide the cushioning required for children if they fall from the playground onto the ground. There's other things we could use, but this is the best that we've seen to use. The best to use is what we use at Unidad Park, but it's very expensive. It costs as much as the playground equipment.
Thank you.
Further questions for Carl on this item? Seeing none, let's have a motion for approval.
So move.
So moved by Harry, seconded by Larry. Public comment concerning this item? Take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, that item A is approved 7-0. We'll move into item B, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance to abandon the approximately 20 by 105 feet of unimproved alley running north and south parallel to North Main Street and located half a block west of North Main Street and south of East 14th Street. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. As you read there, this is a request for abandonment of an alley. You can see here in sort of a pink color, this is an alley. It does not go all the way through, and so it's basically a dead-end alley. It is not used. It hasn't been constructed as an alley. It was platted years ago, but never constructed. And the applicant is planning to move any utilities that are in that alley. And basically, the purpose of this is to combine all of these lots into one larger lot for redevelopment, which is related to your next case. There is no opposition from the surrounding property owners. There's no public need for the alley. As I mentioned, it is never constructed as an alley, and it doesn't go through anywhere, so it would just be dead end in any case. Staff does recommend approval with normal conditions, paying the required city fee per the fee schedule, getting a quick claim deed where the city disclaims the property so that the owner can then fulfill the number 3, which is replatting the properties altogether.
Is there a plan for what is going to happen with that property once this abandonment takes place?
Yes, in fact, that's the subject of the next item, which is the rezoning to commercial. And so this did go to the Planning Commission at their June meeting, and they approved it or recommended approval unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions for John James? Harry?
This is in my district, so I move to approve as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second by Tommy. Any public comment concerning this item? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move into item C, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z23-05 to rezone property from the single-family residential zoning district to the neighborhood commercial zoning district located at 1065 North Main Street. You're on, John.
Thank you. This is the companion to that item you just saw. This would rezone that property. As I mentioned, the plan is to replat all of that into one lot. The plan is the request is to rezone from single-family residential to neighborhood commercial. This is identified in the city's comprehensive plan as neighborhood center, which is sort of a neighborhood commercial designation. This future land use plan, this is the property in question right there. It is part of this larger neighborhood center, which is a defined commercial designated area at this intersection. I'll note that this is a major arterial, this is a minor collector, and then a major collector. So this is at the intersection of 2 major streets. And so that's one of the reasons that it makes probably more sense for commercial rather than residential. These are, as you can see, platted residential properties, but they have gone undeveloped for a number of years, decades really. And so, again, given the high traffic at this major intersection, the applicant has come forward with this commercial rezoning request. Here's the zoning. You can see that the rest of the intersection is already zoned some type of commercial. It's just this one quadrant of the intersection that's not. And as I mentioned, this corner is undeveloped. There are some homes here, and then, of course, the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. But again, at the corner of a major intersection, it does make sense for this neighborhood-oriented commercial. I just will note this isn't general commercial or heavy commercial that would allow more obnoxious or higher intensity kinds of commercial development, but the neighborhood center or neighborhood commercial designation is smaller scale that's intended to be neighborhood compatible, neighborhood friendly. As I mentioned, it is consistent with the future land use plan, which already designates this as neighborhood center. It has been vacant, and it's at the intersection of two major thoroughfares. Staff does recommend approval. At their June meeting, the Planning Commission also recommended approval unanimously. And there was no opposition in response to our notifications for this. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for John?
Yes, please. Are you aware of the developer's plans more specifically for that corner? Because it is indeed surrounded by single-family homes, and what is shown in purple to the lower right-hand corner of your screen is the Baptist retirement community, is it not? So that's
right.
also quiet residential as well. So curious what's possible.
The applicant, I believe, has a representative here, and they can probably expand on that more. My understanding is the intent is for a dollar store of some sort. Having said that, you are approving the zoning, so you're approving anything that's allowed in that neighborhood commercial zoning. And so there's no guarantee that this will actually be the development. But again, the purpose of the neighborhood commercial zoning is intended to be friendly and compatible with adjacent residential or within or at the edge of neighborhoods. And so I think if they were asking for general commercial or heavy commercial, staff would likely not have supported that request. But with the neighborhood commercial designation, gave us the comfort level of supporting commercial that would be nearby to residential.
Further questions, Tommy?
Well, I would point out, I drove over there and looked around a good bit. There's a manufacturing facility not 200 feet away from that major intersection there where 14th, I guess, turns into 19th, where Main connects right there. Atmos Energy has a big yard, has just put up a large commercial building there.
Remodeled that area, right? Because it was already.
And there's a business across the street from the subject property, a small bookkeeping tax service over there. So just as way of orientation for the council.
I'll point out one more thing that our ordinance requires where commercial is adjacent to residential. There are some screening requirements, so either landscaping or fencing that would have to be between the commercial business and the adjacent residential. That's another protection
Baptist
that we
Memorial
have.
did not reply in a negative way, and they would have been notified about this development, and there was no response from Baptist Memorial regarding this change of zoning, correct?
That's right.
In fact, they sold them the property.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. All right, with that, let's take, do I have a motion for approval?
So move.
So moved by Harry, seconded by Tommy. Public comment?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jim Gunn. Excuse me. I am the owner, one of the three owners of the development company that is proposing to build a project at that location. We're planning on building a Dollar Tree at that location in lieu of a Family Dollar or a Family Dollar combination store. We've are in the process of closing on the land here within the next week to 10 days. We're in the process of finalizing our plans to be submitted to the city for approval. We like this location a lot. The family Dollar Tree likes it also, and so we're looking forward for approval and getting started in construction probably in October. Could be sooner depending on how long it takes for the plans to go through the permitting process of the city. And once we start, we should be open for business probably within 5 months. And again, that depends on Dollar Tree when they start to fixture and merchandise their stores. But construction should be through within 5 months on the longest.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Gunn? Larry?
Mr. James mentioned a separation, something that separates the family housing from this area. Do you have any plans on that?
Yes, sir. We normally try to do that when we're adjacent to residential or living areas. There's an abandoned house that is right below this project. We will fence that property line. And what we do there is normally come in with a 6-foot cedar fence. Also, along the alleyway of the abandonment, there is a single house there that's basically at the very back of the property, and we will isolate that corner. So we'll be putting up fencing on 2 of the 4 sides of the property, so that we are isolated a little bit as far as sound and light. Also, there's landscaping that'll be done to meet and to comply with the city. We're pretty much open to trying to maintain the neighborhood because it's a neighborhood business, and we do get a lot of walk-on business there, and so we try to get this as friendly as possible to the community.
Does the construction of the dollar store allow for other businesses, convenience stores, I'm not sure I understand how that.
No,
I
sir.
think they want the competition, dear.
Yeah, it'll be a single store. It's about 10,000 square foot. It may be 9,400. It depends on the configuration of being able to get the building in there with the parking requirements. But it will only be a single freestanding building. There will not be additional facilities there.
All right, with that, there is a motion and a second. Any public comment? With that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving item C, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item D is first reading. Thank you, sir. Item D is first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z23-06 to rezone property from the single-family residential zoning district to the two-family residential zoning district located at 2153 Valley View Drive. You're on, John.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a requested rezoning from RS1 single family to RS2 two family, and I'll describe some of the differences for that. For the most part, the uses allowed are all the same with the exception of the housing types, and I have a slide that'll explain that. So this is the area, and this is the property in question right there. And so I'm not going to read through all of this, but basically this describes what's around it. And part of the reason for staff's recommendation of approval is the zoning that's around it. Everything in orange you see is multifamily residential zoning. Everything to the south here is two-family residential zoning. There's zero lot line townhome zoning, RS3, a little farther south, and then everything over here is also RS3. The one exception is this one cul-de-sac, which is residential single-family and the subject lot. And so given its location on an intersection where there's townhomes across the street, there are apartments catty-cornered across the street, and then zero lot line homes across the street to the north, staff felt that the RS2 zoning was appropriate given the surrounding zoning. I will mention even though this has the RS2 zoning, all of that is currently developed as single-family. So even though it was originally zoned for duplexes, it was actually constructed as single-family. So I won't read through all of this, but there were some questions at the Planning Commission on what is the difference between RS1, RS2, and RS3. And basically, this kind of summarizes the differences, slight differences in how close the building can be to the property lines. RS3 actually has quite a bit smaller lots. And so, as you'll notice on the previous slide, these lots are much smaller because they're townhouses on very narrow lots. These lots are actually a little bit smaller than normal single-family lots because they're zero lot lines, so that allows the home to be shifted to sit, one side sits right on the property line. That allows the lots to be a little bit narrower and smaller as well. And basically, the primary difference between RS1 and RS2, RS1 only allows a single-family home, and then RS2 would also allow for a duplex on the property. And then if you heard the discussion at the Planning Commission, a few of the planning commissioners who voted against the RS2 said that the RS3 zoning they felt like they could possibly support given the amount of RS3 zoning in the area. That would allow those zero lot line homes like to the north across the street. It would also allow twin homes, which is basically a duplex that's split by a property line so that each side could be owned separately. I think part of the concern, or addressing the concern, the Planning Commission believed that if you had basically a duplex but that could be owned separately, you would be more likely to have owner occupancy rather than rental occupancy, which I think is one of the concerns that was raised at the Planning Commission. This is just a picture of that vacant lot, and this is the vacant lot here. You can see the townhomes across the street and then the apartments as well. I will point out, however, that let me go back to that map real quick. As the opponents of this pointed out, this street, Westway, is kind of a dividing line between the more intensive multifamily uses, and then as you go east of there, you see almost exclusively single family. And so that was part of their concern about introducing a duplex across that street that is kind of a dividing line. Both zonings, RS1, RS2, or RS3, in fact, are consistent with the neighborhood designation of the city's plan. As I already described, the area is kind of a mixture, but Westway does create sort of a boundary of sorts. Valley View is a heavily traveled roadway, and so it's also the location. One of the things staff considered, if you've been out there, they've just installed the mailboxes, the group mailboxes for the neighborhood are right there on the right-of-way in front of this property with a large brick enclosure. And so part of the thinking was a single-family home owner might not want that basically in their yard, and so something like a duplex might be something that would help the property owner overcome that obstacle. I turned on the pointer, and I'm not sure how that happened. But
It's
focused on you.
there we go. Sorry.
Jump over there.
And this is just a little bit of a zoom out showing that basically everything in this area here, with the exception of just this piece, is zoned something other than RS1. And so that was part of the logic for staff's recommendation of supporting the applicant's request on his property to go to RS2.
The back of of that red triangle or box, whatever it is called, they share the alley backyard, right? So that cul-de-sac, those homes in the cul-de-sac, their front door all faces into the cul-de-sac, not into Valley View?
I believe so. I'm not sure about that corner lot. I assume it faces the cul-de-sac, but I actually don't
Mayor,
recall.
that is correct.
That's what I thought.
That is correct.
Just verifying that.
We did send out our notices, 28 notices to the properties within 200 feet. We received none in favor and 5 in opposition, and you can see the locations of that opposition. Staff did recommend approval, as I mentioned. At their June meeting, the Planning Commission recommended denial. That vote was 6-0. I think one of the notes in your packet might have mentioned 4-3.
It says it's 4-3.
Yeah,
but
that
it
was a typo. It was 6-0 at the Planning Commission. As I mentioned, some of the commissioners indicated that they would likely support RS3 instead of RS2 if the applicant wanted to come back for that. And then finally, based on that denial by the recommendation by the Planning Commission, this will require a 3/4 majority vote by the council in order to approve.
You want to go back to the slide that goes through the details of RS2 versus RS3? Because it would seem to me that the higher density would have the greater opposition than an RS2. So I'm a little confused about the desire to say they would approve it of an RS3, not an RS2, because again, I would think the RS2 would be the preferential. But you're saying it's the opposite.
And I think the main difference for that is the RS3, each home is on its own lot, even though it can be attached, like in a townhome or a twin home. Given that they're each on their own individual lots, that there would be a greater likelihood for owner occupancy versus a duplex, which is typically, even if the owner may live on one side and rent out the other side, or rent both, so the likelihood of it becoming a rental unit is greater in RS2. At least that's the concern of the neighbors and the Planning Commission.
So we're voting today on whether to allow it to go from RS1 to an RS2.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm going to start with Tommy with questions.
John,
Comments.
you mentioned the mailboxes there. As far as you know, those are going to remain there? Because you mentioned that in y'all's, as y'all thought through it and worked through it, that might be a problem for a single-family residence there would be because that's a fairly significant size of mailboxes there.
It is. It's in the right-of-way, so it's not technically on their property, although it is in the area people think of as their front yard. But yeah, I don't foresee any plans to remove that by the post office.
Is that a post office thing? They are the ones that come to us to be able to put that in our right-of-way?
Well, they don't have to come to us, but
they can
yes,
just do it.
Yeah, they.
Okay.
And I don't know how all that works, and I honestly, maybe someone from Public Works knows if there are any approvals by the city needed for that, but they don't come through planning and development.
Let's ask Shane Kelton. Shane, do you have a comment on that? Do they come to you to ask for approval of putting in this mailbox structure on the lot?
Good morning, Council. Most of the time,
In this case?
yeah, in this case, no, those were put there without notifying the city. We have been working with them to change that, so in the operations of where they're going, because we did have some site restrictions. Excuse me.
And the property owner who owns that lot, what was his point of view as it relates to when he saw those mailboxes being put there?
We were not contacted on this specific one, and I don't know if this was a Bentwood property or not. I'm not sure who actually owned that property, because there's a nice big brick fence around it that the U.S. Postal Service didn't put up, so.
I don't know who owned the
so-
property. It just shows as a business name on Tom Green County Appraisal District website, so I don't know if Bentwood sold it, and I don't.
No, I tried to find too.
I don't
so
know.
couldn't.
Holland
said they sold it years ago.
Okay, so they don't own it anymore.
They don't own it now.
But, yeah,
somebody
I know
owns
the
it.
post office did not put up the nice brick wall around the actual boxes themselves, so. But most of the time, they do not. Well, in the past, they have not necessarily contacted us when they put up those structures, those group or community mailboxes. But we've had one or two here recently that have actually been in the right of way and were view obstructions. So we've contacted them, and now we are partnering a lot more on where they get placed. Now, not necessarily as far as the general area of placement, but to make sure that there are no view restrictions or anything like that that would be a traffic safety issue.
Do you have any idea if it were to stay RS1 and the person going to build on the lot did not want that, is that just too bad? It's there?
Right away.
It's
No,
right away.
it's in the right of way, so there's nothing that the adjacent property owners can
Okay.
do to have it removed.
So the idea is really RS1's not going to work on that property. It doesn't look like there would be potential for that to happen. And
No.
how long is it? Do we know when Bentwood sold it and how long this lot's been empty?
Yeah, maybe we could drill down on the Tax Appraisal District website if they've got that much detail on there. I didn't go that far down. I will say, I spent a good bit of time, would be an overstatement, but I went out there 3 times over the weekend, because when you look at our maps, and the one that was in our packet, when you see the different zoning around there, you view that one way when you look at that map and say, yeah, something other than RS1 might be appropriate. But I will say, when you go out there and look at the houses out there, those are all single-family residential homes that on the appraisal district, even if they're the 0 lot line across Valley View, and especially in the cul-de-sac there to the east, those houses are valued on the appraisal district from on the lower end, 300,000 up to almost $500,000 on the upper end there. So it gives me pause for anything but RS1, but now having the mailbox there gives me pause for someone that would develop that or someone that would buy that and want to put a single-family home on there with that mailbox, and having people come up there onto your, it's not your property, it's the right-of-way, but come there and get their mail. So this one kind of, that threw me for a loop, the mailbox thing. Doggone. I'm gonna ask the council. This is something, y'all weigh in on this, and I think what you're saying, Mayor. You think it might be something more appropriate rather than RS1 is what I hear you
Yeah,
saying.
I think leaving it as RS1 is probably going to very much limit it. It'll be an empty lot, and it'll stay an empty lot for a long time as an RS1. I can't imagine my business to do, but I looked at it and I said, I don't see that being developed as an RS1. I can see it being developed as an RS2 or an RS3. And I know sometimes when we say the word townhouse or duplex, there's a negative reaction to it. But let me say 2 things. Number one, there's a huge demand for duplexes and townhouses in this city. And many of those people have gotten, let me just say, many people have gotten out of the big homes and want a smaller home and want the advantages of a country club lifestyle. It's golfing, it's pickleball, it's all those things. There are townhouses on Colorado and Jefferson as you turn off of Colorado to the left, and there's townhouses on the left. Those homes are beautiful, and you would never know they're townhouses. They fit, they're very nice. They're well kept. But the same thing on Bishop in Colorado, there are townhouses as well that look very nice. So sometimes it's about how it's designed and how it's designed in terms of how it impacts a neighborhood. But I don't see leaving it as RS1 as the right decision. Now, whether it should be an RS2 or an RS3 is questionable. Again, I'm not the developer. I don't own the land. I don't know what the conversations have been with people who might want to build there. But I don't think RS1 is the right zoning for that particular location. It's my opinion. Who else has an opinion?
Yeah.
Tom? Larry.
It seems as though this post office box is a fly in the ointment. Is that correct? In terms of it being considered for RS1?
It is RS1 now.
And it seems as though that this post office box was constructed without the city being involved in the process. Is that correct?
So that happened, unfortunately.
Is there any opportunity for the mailbox to be moved elsewhere so it can be retained as RS1?
I don't know the answer to that.
I
don't
doubt
think
that
we
you're
could
going
get
to
an
get
answer to
them to move, but
It'd probably be a question for I guess, for the post office. I don't know.
That's federal, I doubt it.
I don't think we can require them to move it. As far as that, I'm pretty sure that that's the case. I was looking at Teresa a while ago, and she was nodding as well. I really do believe that that's not something the city can tell the federal government we want that moved at this point.
I think it'd be a long time and a lot of money on a lawsuit that we wouldn't win, so I don't think that we're going to go there.
John, a question for you back on this. This may not have a bearing, but the question just came to mind. Assuming it were approved as RS2 for a duplex, would that allow a front entrance onto both Valley View and Westway? If so, it might give more of an appearance of two single-family homes. Could they have two separate entrances?
The short answer is yes. I've seen some very nice neighborhoods where that's done, and that's a design choice where one front door faces each street, so from the front, either side looks like a single-family home, but there's no way we can require that. But that would be a good design choice from their standpoint, with the exception of, maybe the mailboxes preclude that option, because then one front door would basically be facing a mailbox.
John, I didn't watch this on planning, but why did planning come through with a 6-0 against this?
I think largely the neighborhood opposition, the argument that even though the surrounding zoning, a lot of it is RS2 or RS3, that Westway really was kind of a dividing line from higher intensive stuff to the west of that. And then he really transitioned to, even though it's townhomes or RS2 zoning, it's all single family, zero lot line, detached single family on that side of the street.
Well, so I see Tommy's point and I see the mayor's point on this, but I would say if we want to see this developed and put it on the tax roll, it doesn't make sense as an RS1, a 2, or a 3. And I'm kind of agree with them on a 3, but this is all about, revenue property and go. It's easier to sell it as 2 properties and more revenue, but I'm kind of leaning that way too. I was curious about what planning had said and why they were strong with the 6-0.
And honestly, there was some neighborhood opposition that spoke. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion from the planning commissioners themselves. And so some of that speculation about what they heard from the opposition.
As you work with them, let's say it gets approved to an RS2, and you work with them, is there a way in the development of it that we can ask the 2-door thing, one on Valley View, one on Westway, as conditional in order to, quote, make it feel more single-family oriented? Can that be conditional?
No, we can't require that. We could talk to the owner and developer and home builders and say, we'd really like you to consider this, but with this type of zoning, we can't require that.
So let's go the next step. So if we say no to moving it from RS1 to RS2, the developer could come back and then ask to have it moved to an RS3?
They could. I believe.
Or can we, as a council, say we won't approve an RS2, but we'll approve an RS3 zone change?
Can't do that today. What you could do is send it back to the Planning Commission, I believe, without a decision, and have them consider RS3 instead. We'd have to send out new notices and to the surrounding properties, but we could take that back to them at their next meeting for consideration before you make a final decision on it. That would save the developer or the owner some time. They wouldn't have to reapply with a new fee and all of that. So that is an option for you to remand it back to the Planning Commission.
I don't think that would change the neighborhood opposition at all. In fact, it might intensify, I'm thinking, a little bit intensify the opposition there for an RS3, because that could even be, I guess you'd say, more intensive than what maybe the RS2 was, and they were opposed to the RS2.
The only difference is that there would be an alleyway, not an alleyway, but distance between the two buildings, so it would appear just like a single-family home where you would have land and yard or fence separating the townhomes, is that right? Or not?
They could develop it that way, but with townhomes, well, if they do townhomes, they would be attached. And on that lot, you haven't done the math, but you could at most get 3 or 4 adjacent townhomes attached on that property. Or you could do a twin home, as I mentioned, which is basically a duplex, but with a lot line running down the middle so that each half of the duplex would be owned separately.
And that could happen on the RS2.
No, the RS2 would be a single lot with a duplex. RS3 would allow them to maybe split the lot in half. It would still be a duplex, but each side would be its own. And potentially, if you picture these lots and how narrow they are right over here, you could maybe split this into 3 or 4 side-by-side narrow lots for townhomes.
But not for duplexes. You'd get 2 duplexes on this piece of property. Is that what you said?
If you did a duplex, you could only get 1 duplex, so 2 units.
The density would be better with the RS2 than the RS3. So in that sense, your density issue is less impactful if you look at it in that sense.
Right, it's a trade-off between density versus potentially greater chance of owner occupancy. But there's nothing that, I mean, I don't want to play that up too much because you could create this as 2 separate lots and then somebody could still buy the whole thing and rent them out. So that's always an option. I mean,
Well, there's always an option to rent. I mean, I don't care what you
but
build.
that's part of the concern. I don't want to overplay that because there's some reasons that that's not a great way to look at owner occupancy versus renter occupancy as a decision factor, but that's what some of the opposition was.
I was going to say, I think some of the opposition that they stated at the Planning Commission was, they were concerned about it being not owner-occupied, that it would be a rental when everything around there is owner-occupied, regardless of the zoning that on which it was built. There was concern about the lack of owner-occupied and it being a rental.
But on the townhouses that you talked about that currently exist on Valley View, right? Do we know if they're owner occupied or rented?
We don't.
I mean,
my guess
you can
is
throw a lot of things out there,
Right.
but the reality is the following: are they rented or are they owned?
my guess is, given that area, they're likely to be a greater likelihood of owner occupancy than maybe other parts of town, just given the property values and home values. But we've not looked into that.
I think, looking at the Tom Green County Tax Appraisal website, these first maybe 4 or 5 lots that are on Westway in the corner of Valley View and Westway are owned by a I couldn't tell if it was for sure if it was a private equity firm or just a real estate investment firm out of Austin. So again, 3 or 4 or 5 of those were owned outside San Angelo. I'm assuming those would be rentals. Just looking at that company's website, and I think some of those others going back to the west there towards the Stripes could be more likely owner-occupied as townhomes.
So is there opposition to what those look like and how they fit into that community?
Yes. Yes, there was. That was some of the opposition was they were not as well kept as what the neighbors did take care of their single-family homes. Yeah, yeah.
May I ask a question or two? Using your cursor, can you point out for us on this map where the mailboxes have been installed?
Yeah, you can see it right there. It's the little bit of
That little
discolored
yellow smudge
spot that's, and I wish we would have included a picture of that, but if you look if you've been out there, it's the mailbox with a brick wall around
Right.
it, and then there's kind of some
Which
rock
is what they do out
area
there a lot
around
anyway
it.
on,
Right.
But yeah, you can kind of see
drive
the
that
lighter
way.
colored spot right there on Valley View.
So residents of that area would typically drive up. Yes, I can see it here as well. I just thought people in the audience might like to see it. Thank you, Daniel. They would typically drive up, pop out of their car while their car is running and collect their mail and drive on. Is that correct?
Which, by the way, happens all day long at Bentwood, on all other streets, just FYI.
So I've had a lot of conversations about this. I also have driven out there and looked multiple times, and I also did some research about the owners, and I furthermore want to publicly agree with the mayor's assessment of 2 properties in Santa Rita, which are lovely. However, the conversation has sort of veered off into territory that we have no control over. We have no design authority. We have no idea what the developer will choose to build, what quality of materials they will use, whether or not it will be compatible with homes that have been there, in some cases, 30 years. Once I stopped looking at numbers and letters that designate zoning codes, it was a very clear solution for me to keep it RS1, regardless of the mailbox. And the reason is, if you look both to the right on your map and to the bottomward portion of the map, the south portion and the the east portion of your map, those are all single-family homes. The ones to the south, even though they sit in an RS2 zoning area, the developers of those properties chose to build single-family homes. And all of those homes back up, if I'm not mistaken, to a golf course. Is that correct? So it becomes cleaner and neater and tidier. If you look at it from that point of view, the answer seems obvious. I also think that it's likely that the Planning Commission saw that as well. It's very compelling. When you have a 6-0 vote, it should be compelling when it's here in this body or in any other body that we've appointed to provide expert assessment of a situation. We have a very interesting situation because you can see, and it's rather unique, you have almost every possible residential option on that corner. So it's easy to get mesmerized by what's across the street, one direction or the other direction. So if we could somehow be the kings and queens of development of this piece of property and guarantee that something as lovely as what's on Jefferson in Colorado is built there, I would be voting yes. But we cannot.
The conversation with the Planning Commission was very specific about voting RS1 to RS2, but there was consideration for moving from an RS1 to an RS3. Is that correct?
There were at least 1 or 2 commissioners that specifically mentioned that I'm voting no on RS2, but I might support RS3. I can't say that that was a majority of the commission. They didn't all speak to that, but there were at least a couple that mentioned that.
So can we as a council make a decision today to not vote on the RS1 to RS2, but send it back to them for reconsideration for an RS3?
Yeah, I believe that you do have the authority to do that.
And that will allow further conversation on whether that Planning Commission was very specific about the RS2, but supported an RS3. Perhaps they did.
Right, and
we
then
don't know that.
It would come back to you, and you would be able to make the decision to go to RS2. That would still be on the table, or RS3, or just deny it and keep it as RS1. I will point out one more thing because of the discussion in looking at the street view of this area. If I were developing this lot, I would have the home face towards Westway, and then what you would end up, if you look at this property here, you're going to have just a backyard fence all along that where the mailbox is. So it's not like that mailbox would be right in their front yard. It would be behind their backyard fence
That's
to
probably
the
what
side.
they would do, because they're not going to put the front of their house.
Right.
And if you go through Bentwood, again, all of those mailbox complexes, which exist all over Bentwood, they're generally at the back end of a fence and close to the golf course, more than to a house.
John,
Well, I'm sure somebody wouldn't put a front door on Valley View
No.
here. They would
Yes.
put it on Westway, because they're not going to do that, and particularly if they're building them to sell.
You can even get a carport on
Yeah.
on the Valley View part of it.
No, I agree with John's design solution, since we're just having fun imagining architecture in this part of town.
Well, we
That
might be
is
having
the-
fun,
that
but I
is
think
a
it's
great-
kind of realistic to
Oh.
say no one's going to put a front door next to the mailbox.
No,
I
facing
think
west
that's
way solves the problem,
not-
makes the mailbox irrelevant.
So, John, go back to what you just said. You were saying if it remained RS1 and a single-family home, that's what you were talking about, the front door facing west way?
Yes, and I mean, and the applicant may be here to speak to this more than, I don't want to speculate too much, but there's been some discussion about how this may not be developable as RS1, and I think that's maybe an overstatement that if we keep it RS1, it'll never develop.
We don't know that, but
But,
it has been vacant a long time.
Yeah.
Is the owner of this property here, or the person who wants to purchase this property here, to come forward and offer any comment?
Whomever it is, I did not attend the planning commission meeting. I watched it a couple of times on
Correct.
YouTube, but no one spoke
No.
in favor or as the applicant. Okay, I tell you what I'm going to do, just to see where this goes, folks. Because of the opposition and because of the single-family homes surrounding that, I'm going to make a motion that we deny this for an RS2, and that would be in keeping with what the Planning Commission did. So my motion is to deny the RS2 and leave it RS1.
Second it.
Any public comment?
Can I be a public comment?
No, you cannot. You had an opportunity to be vocal before. You're done.
It was before the motion.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor and a second to keep it as an RS1 and not change the zoning to an RS2. We will go council member by council member and take a vote. So we'll start with Larry.
No.
So, hold up.
The motion is to deny, so if you want to deny it, you would be a yes vote.
Yes. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
It's like those tricky ballots. We're like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
I'm voting with Larry. What he said.
Lucy?
Yes.
Mayor? No. Harry? No. Tom?
No.
Tommy?
Yes.
So it's 4-3. Is that?
It's got to be a supermajority.
A supermajority to approve, so I
approve.
think a 4-3 to deny would pass as a denial.
I don't want to know about
Well,
what you
I'm
think.
gonna
I want to
defer
know
to
what the
Teresa.
lawyer says.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So the denial goes 4-3.
So it is denied 4-3, even though it was a yes vote. It's denied. So it goes back, and the applicant can go back to the Planning Commission and ask for reconsideration for an RS3. Is that correct or not?
They could reapply. Yes, they couldn't go back for, I think it's either 6 or 12 months. They couldn't ask again for RS2.
Correct.
I think they could come for RS3 as a separate request, if they choose to.
Moving on to the next item, which is item E, consider a resolution amending the schedule of fees and charges to amend charges for cemetery fees.
Mayor, you read that too fast for me. I wasn't ready. Okay, so we're bringing back cemetery fees for you. We went back and we met with a few of the cemetery board members, and we scrubbed our projections and our calculations, and so we're back now. We did end up removing a couple of our proposals, our proposed fee increases, as well as adjusting one or two as well. So now for concrete boxes, our current fee is $600 and proposing $795. The concrete vault is $675, proposing $895. Opening and closing regular is at $1,250 and proposing $1,500. Opening and closing infant is now $300 and proposing $500. And opening and closing stacking is at $1,350 and we're proposing $1,650. So that's the first group. If there are any questions, if not, I'll move on.
Any questions on this first page? Move on.
Outside container setting is at 100, proposing 200. Lot transfer at 75, proposing 150. Marker survey at $100, proposing $150. Overtime hourly at $175, proposing $250, and overtime weekend at $325, proposing $500. And I think, oh, there's two more, the tent setups, proposing both at $500 for first and second tents.
Questions for Tina on these cemetery fee proposals? Lucy?
I just wanted to make a comment, Tina, and I wanted to thank Jeremy that with this, the Fairmont.
Analysis.
Yeah, that they gave us, it made a lot more sense, and it showed us how, in comparison, they were to the other cemeteries, so I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Move approval as presented.
Motion for approval, second by Karen. Any public comment? You've been a funeral home
I was fixing to
owner,
say,
so
we're
this
bringing up
could
the
be a
old pro
biased
here.
opinion here.
This may be an opinion. Steve Hampton, SMD 6. I wasn't clear on this agenda item that whether it was going up or down. I find out now that it's gone up. And I feel that this is a bit of gouging. I've witnessed some of the service that I received over there, and I found it wanting. I think that most of these fees are not bad, but the opening and closing regular and opening and closing overtime, I think, are too high. We are caught in a situation where we have a corporation that bought, a new corporation moved in, bought one cemetery, and you have an old corporation that never seems to get enough, that they have gone up. But I think that they're moving these prices too high, and that you're pushing people into alternative situations of that they may not religiously believe in. So I would suggest that you reconsider some of these fees.
My comment on that would be the following, and that is that if we did not have comparisons to the rates charged by the other three cemeteries, saying that it's gouging might be viable, but it can't be viable when in fact you compare it to these other three cemetery fees.
Well, just because one person goes up and they're all corporations trying to make a profit doesn't mean a city-owned cemetery should be doing the same. Now, I know you have to keep up, you have to pay, but you're going to put yourself out of business eventually, is what I'm saying. And if you keep sticking it to the employee, the citizen, which you are sworn to represent and act on their behalf, I would say that you're pushing the line. Now, whether you do it all the time, I don't know all the facts. I agree, I don't know all the facts, but I think in my witness and experience that I think that you're pushing it too far on some of these. Now, some of them you're not, and so we can live with. You can go up on some, and that's a compromise. We're in a time of financial uproar and upheaval, and where you have appraisals going up. You're sticking to everybody. You want to raise salaries and push and push and push, and when does it break? So I would beg you to reconsider, and thank you.
I think a lot of work has been put into this analysis. If it was just somebody putting numbers on the pages without relationship to what other people's fees are, but this has been really looked at and studied and analyzed. It isn't just someone putting numbers on a sheet of paper increasing the fees at this point in time. So,
Yes, ma'am, and I would point out one important fact, and that is that currently the general fund is supporting and supplementing the cemetery by $125,000 in the current budget. So I really don't think there's any room for saying that there's any gouging going on.
Well, and I don't think the
Unless the property
city is
taxpayers
responsible
supplementing.
for covering the costs, right?
Right.
So, yes, are we responsible for making sure that the cemetery is in a positive state, that we take care of it, that it looks, I hate to say welcoming, because I don't think anyone wants to be welcomed out there necessarily, but I think we need to create a great environment for what happens at a cemetery. And again, there's been a lot of work and effort that has gone into this analysis. And I think I would stand behind the work and effort here, better understanding it, and I would make a motion to accept these fees as presented today. And a second by Harry. Any public comment? With that, we will take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, the current cemetery fees as presented will be accepted and put into practice.
Thank you, Mayor.
With that, we will now move into our closed session, of which there is none. We will do a follow-up on administrative issues, consider items discussed in executive session, which there were none. Consider approving various board nominations, the Construction Board of Adjustments and Appeals, Gary Cortez to SMD 4 to a first term ending February 2025, and the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Board, Gianna Owens, SMD 6 to a first term ending July 2025. May I have a motion for approval of these two?
So moved.
So moved by Tom, seconded by Harry. You're too slow. Harry's on top of it. All right, any public comment on these two nominations? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Those two nominations are approved. Announcements and consideration of future agenda items, are there any? With none?
You know what, I do.
What? Go ahead.
I
You're
do.
almost too late.
I'm almost too late. I need an update on Kirby Park, where we are on that one.
Perfect. Any other? All right, with that, motion
we
for
adjourn.
adjournment. I have a motion and a second by somebody.
Second.
By Lucy. You're good. You're in. You're in. I'm sure there's no public comment concerning that, so we'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are formally adjourned at 9:53 a.m. on this July 18th day.